Hey everyone, it's Comic Artist Pro Secrets. I'm Ethan Van Sciver, 26-year veteran of the comic book industry that used to be. World's most charming, elegant, eloquent, yet humble man. Great big Star Wars fan and trusted member of the media. So that's why I'm here at Forbes, Forbes Online. You know, not Forbes the magazine per se. Print is dying, and that is the problem that we find ourselves confronting here with this article. Where does DC Comics fit in AT&T's vision for Warner Media? We're going to find out from this article that they're kind of the odd duck, and they are the elephant, the white elephant. They're not really what AT&T was hoping for. I'm not sure that AT&T really wants to be in the comic book publishing business. Let's read a little bit of this, and I'm going to tell you why there's a skosh of schadenfreude here for me. Not much, because mostly it's mixed with salty tears of sadness. Because I love DC Comics. I really do. I love their characters. There are a lot of people over there that I really appreciate and I think are good. But yeah, ultimately this is, this is waiting for the alligator to eat you last. Like that kind of a situation. In a way, maybe not exactly, but let's look at this. Oh, it's canceled. Here we have DC Comics and then a cancel button here. In this photo illustration, an American motion picture label based at Warner Brothers DC Comics logo is seen on an Android mobile phone device with a computer key that says cancel. That's exactly what it is. Thank you for Thank you so much for the caption, Forbes, describing exactly what we see here and not explaining why that might be. Earlier this month at San Diego Comic-Con, returning attendees noticed a major change on the show's massive exhibit floor. San Diego Comic-Con, how sad. It used to be about comics. It's really not so much about comics anymore. Now it is more about the media. It's more about pop culture. It's more about movie studios and television. Comics are, just like with every quote-unquote comic book convention, we have been relegated to the corners. Nobody really cares anymore. And there are an abundance of reasons for that. I talk about them all the time. I talk about how the comic book industry actually cannibalized every source that it had for making itself more popular, for making us shiny and exciting. We ate all of those. We destroyed all those things out of jealousy and envy and just stupidity in general. So now at comic book conventions, of course, comic books are the least interesting aspect of it. And at San Diego Comic-Con, something that used to be all about, comic books, it is now all about Hollywood movies, sometimes related to comic books or science fiction. And there's the Eisner Awards that have been completely taken over by SJWs. And now, of course, the comic book companies themselves, even the biggest ones, can't really afford to have the big, massive presences that they used to have. You used to go to San Diego and you would see a massive Marvel Comics booth or a massive DC Comics booth, Image booth. The money isn't there anymore. These people aren't making any money. And so they're being slowly pushed out. So this is the change. The booth for DC Comics, which had been a massive standalone pavilion in the center of the publisher's area of the center of the hall, was gone. America's oldest and second largest comic book publisher had retreated to the far back corner of the hall, where it was incorporated into the multi-level Warner Media exhibit in the shadow of banks of giant monitors previewing upcoming shows and cast appearances. Just a part of Warner Media, no longer DC Comics in and of itself. Why? Why are we at this point right now? Why are we here? The subtext of this move could not have been clearer. AT&T purchased DC Comics. They're now the parent company of Warner Media. So DC came along with that, that package. Its divisions, including DC Comics, previously known as DC Entertainment. It's not DC Entertainment anymore. It's DC Comics. HBO, Turner, and Warner Brothers does not seem terribly interested in being in the comic book publishing business. You don't say. Are you telling me that AT&T doesn't have the same sense of value for tradition of American art forms like comic books? Are you telling me that AT&T doesn't want to just siphon money out to weirdos to make comic books that don't sell, that don't actually create storylines that can be used for anything other than virtue signaling their own, goofy social justice values? I guess that's the way it is. I guess AT&T doesn't really care that much about comic books, and why should they? At this point, why should they? This is the comic book industry has just become a joke. It's become a joke. It's become a bunch of arrogant, egotistical, leftist weirdos who are driving classic, beloved properties into the ground for the sake of diversity and inclusion and all of these weirdo buzzwords that basically mean ruining everything that you used to love about these characters. And that's what it is. Comic books cannot sell anymore. Comic book stores are closing down. There's no money to be made in mainstream comics. Not really. Just for the 1% of the 1%, and everyone else is is suffering. Everyone else is worried right now. They're scared. And in fact, DC Comics is scared. HBO, Turner, Warner Brothers, they don't want to be. It's telling that in a long profile of AT&T CEO John Stanky, his name's Stanky. His name's John Stanky. His name is literally Stinky Toilet. This morning in Variety, DC was one of the only Warner Media brands that was not mentioned. To the extent that DC matters at all in the company's future, it's as a source of owned IP for other media channels and as a lifestyle brand. Yes, DC Comics is going to become exactly what Marvel Comics is becoming at this point. Hey, yeah, we do some comics. We hire weird teenagers to pretend that they're interested in the comics. They're wearing t-shirts and clothing and apparel that all feature our characters, but it isn't really about comic book stories anymore. It isn't about art. It is about the serving as an ambassador to geek culture. That's where DC's going right now. It's where Marvel already is. And it's funny because as I read this, look at this. In terms of pure economics, this makes sense. The entire comic book publishing business in the U.S., including periodicals, digital, and trade, adds up to just $1.1 billion. I know that sounds like a lot of money, guys. That is all the money that our entire industry pulls in a year. That is it. The equivalent of one moderately successful MCU movie. That is the entirety of the efforts of thousands of people in this business. That is not great. According to a 2018 estimate, on a good month, only 35% of the revenue of that goes to DC Comics. We're just looking at $365 million is brought in by DC Comics. $365 million per year. All right, that's just not enough money. That means nothing. That just means nothing to AT&T. Along with a good chunk of trade book sales for perennial titles like Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns. There wasn't ever much in the Time Warner days. It's an even smaller drop in an even bigger ocean following the AT&T acquisition. I mean, just obscure. I think you guys are starting to see the problem. There's another ocean in play as well, an ocean of red ink. AT&T's debt following the $85.4 billion Warner Media acquisition stands at $164 billion. That's a lot of money. That's like 150 Justin Biebers. You would need 150 Justin Biebers to be able to make that up, and we don't even want the one we have. You know what I mean? The company obviously believes it can monetize the Warner Media assets to make that back quickly. That's a huge sword hanging over management's head and the kind of thing that gets division chiefs thinking about short-term wins rather than long-term strategy. And indeed, that's what Marvel Comics is doing. I think all of this is starting to make sense. While DC Comics is being responsible and trying to scale back for long-term survival, they're really not going to have the opportunity. It looks likely that it doesn't matter how small they make themselves and how much money they stop losing. They are going to probably get cut anyway. Marvel Comics, on the other hand, full speed ahead, short-term gains might be the way to go in this situation at the end of the comic book industry. It's like, do we really, there's an asteroid coming at planet Earth. Are we conserving our drinking water? No, let's just drink some water, and that asteroid's going to hit anyway. So that's kind of, oh my gosh, it's so bleak. It's so bleak. The comic book industry is where it is right now. Yeah, one place that AT&T does not seem to see any value is in sub-brands. One of the company's first moves following the acquisition was to shutter several of Warner Media's niche streaming service, including the beloved cinephile outlet Filmstruck, seen as many as a prelude to rolling as much of the company's media artillery as possible into a mega streamer to compete with Disney and Netflix and the rest. Seems essential given the precipitous drop in subscribers to AT&T's satellite TV service, DirecTV. DirecTV is horrible. But yeah, it's also in the publishing side. In recent months, DC has dropped the axe on its prestige imprint Vertigo, and we know why. I mean, that did make sense on a micro level, as the people at the editor of Vertigo basically opened the door to a bunch of just radical weirdos who actually made such noise and disgraced themselves on such a huge level that, with various scandals and this and that, the DC felt like they should just shutter the whole brand. And the books didn't even sell. It's one thing to be scandalous, like myself. It's one thing to be controversial, like myself, as long as you can make stuff sell. As long as you're actually making money, then it's good. It's okay to be scandalous. It's okay to get people talking about you. These people at Vertigo managed to be scandalous a-holes and not even make any money. That was the problem there. All right, so that's all gone. They just recently closed Mad Magazine as well. And neither of these was a big moneymaker in terms of month-to-month sales, but both brands occupy some valuable real estate in the psyche of fans. I'm sorry, your psyches are all going to be busted and you're going to be full of despair. That's what's coming right now. Even if the properties built on that land are in disrepair, it seems short-sighted to vacate the premises entirely. Yeah, but at the same time, there is no long-sighted. You're talking about how there really isn't a long-sighted situation here. All right, so yeah, AT&T seems more interested in making DC a consumer lifestyle brand. All right, so you're going to see exactly what Marvel's doing. You're going to see a lot of TV shows for teenagers. You're going to see Disney XD style, projects starring DC Comics characters, and that's where they're going. There's a chat show, DC Daily, in which this is hilarious, a gaggle of media-friendly young people enthused over the latest comics and comic culture offerings from the company. It's here that the lifestyle brand goals come through most clearly. The hosts and their over-the-top squeeing about the latest merch represent Warner Media's highest aspirations for its audience. Younger, hipper, more ethnically and gender diverse than the traditional DC Comics readership, check it out, which is old and male, even by the standards of the comic industry. DC Comics fans are old and male. They're men. They're men my age. They're between the ages of 35 and 60, and DC Comics is trying to market their characters to a much younger audience. And the younger audience is definitely going to be interested in this stuff right here. DC's iconography. Superman's S, the bat signal, Flash's lightning bolt, the Green Lantern symbol on t-shirts like you see here. Oh yeah, you're going to see this stuff all day long if you watch Big Bang Theory. I hope you don't really watch Big Bang Theory that much. So this is where the money comes from. It doesn't come from comics. It comes from symbology. It comes from iconography. It comes from these symbols, which is why when I went to DC Comics and I said, can I have a piece of these symbols that I created? Can I have Blue Lanterns, Red Lanterns, Sinestro Corps, all of these symbols that I'm seeing on people's t-shirts? Don't you think I should have half of 1% of that? I mean, I should get royalties on that? And DC freaked out. They said, no, Ethan. No. You can't have that. That's our bread and butter. We're going to put those symbols everywhere. And indeed they did. And, I was never really paid for them. This is what's going to keep, DC entertainment pretty much alive. These will never, ever go out of style. All right, so this is the situation. A while ago, 30 years ago or so, Jeanette Kahn appealed to Time Warner management under similar circumstances. They wanted to dramatically cut back on DC's current publishing in favor of reprints, which is what we find ourselves doing now again. And she said, no, we need new stuff. This is what DC's lifeblood is. And of course, under Jeanette Kahn, they produced Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, and Sandman. Of course, those projects were incredible money makers, and enthused fans created generations of new DC Comics fans, including myself. I saw Dark Knight Returns, and it blew my mind when I was in high school, when I just entered high school. And that made me realize that I kind of like Batman. Today, DC Comics, sadly, is in a similar situation, following a demoralizing mid-decade move from its traditional home in New York to Warner Brothers' headquarters in Burbank. And by the way, the headquarters in Burbank is beautiful. It's much better than their New York offices. The company had stumbled through various events and line reboots, milking assets like Frank Miller's once fresh take on Batman and post Alan Moore Watchmen, and you're just getting the last dregs of fan appeal and relevance. This article is bang on. It's just bang on. And then of course, where did most of last year's and the year before's profits come from? The 1000th issue of Action Comics, Detective Comics number 1000, with 1000 variant covers, and that's basically that makes your April numbers look like they're crazy, like everything's skyrocketing. How many times are you going to hit the 1000 issue milestone? Not too many times. Recently, DC co-president Dan DiDio publicly fumed that reissues of comics. DC is actually putting out comic books that are just reprints, including the old ads of old books. So you can get these kind of beautiful but fake reprint books, and people prefer them. People really do love the old DC Comics stories, the quality, the heart that went into those stories, much more so than the garbage that they're putting out today. That's got to be alarming to Dan, and indeed it was. He said, "Look, it's outselling current stories. This is a failure on us. Re-releasing old stuff outsells new stuff. That is failure." He said, "We should be focused on moving things forward, always pushing the boundaries and finding new stories to tell. That's how we'll survive and grow this industry." Looking to the future of comics publishing, DC had a booth at a recent Book Expo trade show for the first time in more than a decade, touting its new line of teen and young adult material. See, they're just trying to find where they can go from here, much of which is published direct to trade rather than sold through comic shops. It's not the most visible part of the company, nor directly tied to the familiar DC brand of superheroes, but it could represent the kind of revenues necessary to keep the businesses alive under the looming corporate axe. Faced with cash-starved corporate master with an unsentimental "what have you done for me lately" approach to legacy sub-brands and an urgent need to monetize its new media empire through streaming and licensing, it's not unreasonable to wonder if even Superman himself is capable of rescuing DC Comics as we've known it for the past 80 years. It is the end. These people are starting to realize it's the end, and they are acting out. Talking about Dan DiDio fuming over the reality, talking about these weirdos on Twitter. Some of them, I don't even know these guys. Donnie Cates freaked out at me last night, started calling me names. He's a writer for Marvel, because the things that I'm saying are coming true. And I find it all kind of ironic. People say, is there any schadenfreude in this for you? Yeah, a little bit. But then again, I'm also very, very sad. The reason why I don't work for DC Comics right now, and thank goodness, it's like at the time I didn't realize that was a blessing, was because social justice warriors, not unlike Donnie Cates, got together and pushed me out of DC Comics. Social justice warriors began to call me a Nazi. They called me a white supremacist and a bigot, and they were loud enough and able to get enough attention from tabloid leftist media outlets that DC Comics told me to shut down my social media and just try to disappear. And I said, I won't do that. I have to be able to fight back. I understand that, you as a company at this point, and they were, at this point, DC Comics was desperately trying to merge with AT&T, with Warner Brothers. They didn't want to appear like they were troubled or had any PR issues. They were trying to sign with AT&T for survival. They were drowning even then. They were trying to make themselves look good by saying, hey, Brian Michael Bendis is coming. They had these full-page ads that said, Brian Michael Bendis is coming. Ew. And that was their positive press, and then SJWs were pushing negative press about me. Well, how could DC Comics hire a white supremacist? It's an outrage. I'm not a white supremacist. I really resent that. But, once that label is stuck to you and people think that about you, there's all you can do is deny it, and people can think whatever they want. DC Comics and I eventually decided that we needed to part ways because I would not go away. I wouldn't be quiet. I wouldn't just do. I wouldn't shrink under this pressure. And that was best for DC. They got rid of a PR problem and signed with AT&T. And now AT&T is about to basically execute the company point blank. So, is that funny? Yeah, I guess it would be in a way, except that I love DC Comics, and I hate to see bad things happen to them. I don't want to see comic books disappear at all, but at this point, it is it's inevitable. It's what's going to happen. They're not producing work that is interesting, that is engaging people, that's meeting the needs of their old audience, which is substantial, or a new audience. They're guessing about who they might get to attract to read comics, and they're wrong. They're wrong every single time. So this is the situation. DC Comics, just from my personal point of view, from my standpoint, stopped working with me in order to appeal to AT&T for rescue. And of course, AT&T I think looks at DC Comics the way DC Comics looks at me. You're not necessary. You're just you might be more trouble than you're worth. So I guess that is funny. Come to think of it, that is kind of funny. What can we do? How can we fix this? The only thing that we can really do is we can work as individuals, and we can stop worrying about big companies, and we can stop trusting them to make decisions that are right for creative people, because they never will. They're never going to support their creative people the way that their creative people need to be supported, and they're never going to allow people to do what they were meant to do to begin with. I was made for Cyberfrog. I was made for Rainbow the Brute. I was made for Fearsome and all of the other properties that I have lined up. And thank goodness things worked out the way they were, as DC Comics will probably close its doors within, I always say 5 years. I think it's going to be more like 2 years. I don't think it's going to be very long now. I had a nice head start into building my own little miniature empire for myself, and look forward to what the future holds, and look forward to just seeing what happens to comics, mainstream comics. You guys stick with me. If you haven't yet subscribed to Comic Artist Pro Secrets, do it. I know this was a lengthy video. I don't usually go on for more than 20 minutes. It's usually like 10 minutes, but I have a lot to say about this subject. It means a lot to me. It's a big part of my life, and it is it's like watching your grandparent on life support and realizing that someone is eventually going to have to pull the plug, and looks like it's going to be AT&T. AT&T is going to pull the plug on DC Comics. All right, everyone. Thank you very much. Subscribe. Comment in the comments below in the chat. Let me know what you think about all this, and I'll be back. I'm going to try to make another video and try to upload it even without internet a little bit later today. Bye-bye. Hey, you want to follow me on Twitter? Are you sure? Well, if so, I'm at Ethan Van Sciver. That's at Ethan Van Sciver. See you there. Hey, I got a P.O. box. Want to send me some mail? Send it to Ethan Van Sciver, P.O. Box 607, Marlton, New Jersey, 08053. And I'll probably open it up on the live stream. Thanks very much, everyone.